years, played professionally in the NFL for the Houston Oilers, current commissioner and CEO of the XFL, and of course, one clap for the former St. Ignatius Wildcat quarterback, Mr. Oliver Luck. So we appreciate you joining the show here.
Well, my pleasure to be on. It's always good to be with good Cleveland folks.
That's right. So let's get right into it. So you're working for the NCAA executive, as executive VP of regulatory affairs, and you get a call from Vince McMahon's associates to meet with Vince in person about running the XFL. Had you met Vince before this happened, and what was his pitch like?
Well, I had not met Vince before this all, took place, if you will. So it was back, I think, like in May of this past year. Got a call from one of his guys. I had been working at the NCAA in Indianapolis, and really enjoyed my position there and the work that I was doing. I'm a huge fan of college athletics and what it means for young men, young women, for the universities, et cetera. So. The question was, would you be willing to take a meeting with Vince? And I said, sure. Vince is an extraordinarily gifted entrepreneur, has built this great company, WWE. I'm not a big, wrestling fan, but I was certainly aware of his success and what he had done. So, we sat down over the course of a couple of Saturdays, and he walked me through his vision, his ideas, sort of the first go around back in 2001, because to be honest, I was somewhat skeptical. And I watched,
sure.
As I'm sure you all did, as many
Right.
people did, 2001, XFL, and they didn't cover themselves with glory. Right? It was the best launch of a new football league. So I had lots of questions, but at the end of the day, I think I realized a couple of things. One, he was very committed to this concept. Two, he was putting a lot of capital behind it, and like in any startup, in any sort of space, right? It doesn't need to be sports, but in any startup, money does matter. The ability to have, a capital commitment that can take you through, some of the rough times in the first year or two. And I think the third thing was really sort of maybe the most important, which is, he realized that they didn't launch it properly in 2001.
Okay.
That they had made mistakes, that they did things that were considered, I think, gimmicky by football fans. I believe that to a certain degree, football is really important. It's a part of the fabric of this country. It obviously is the most important sport, right? You ask people who their favorite sports leagues are, and they'll say, number one, NFL, number two, major college football,
Right.
Ohio State or whomever, right? Penn State, Michigan, whoever it is. And, when I was a kid growing up, right, University Heights, I was born in 1960, we used to debate, because we were flipping baseball cards, and we would debate whether baseball was still the national pastime, and the answer today, nobody debates that question. It's football. Football's king. We love the game. So, I think, he realized that the game was really important, a major part of the fabric of this country, and that they didn't treat it with sort of the appropriate respect, in 2001. And I got a very good sense, and everything that's happened since I, went on board at the XFL back in July of this past year, everything that I've experienced, he's allowed me to sort of, build this league in a very, sort of methodical, sensible, if you will, fashion, right? And getting people like Bob Stoops on board, or some of the other coaches we've hired, because it's all about sort of having credibility in the football space, and that's ultimately what's really important for us right now.
So you're confirming that the scramble is gone.
Well, that's an example, to be honest, about not sort of treating the game with respect. You don't have to do the
Sure.
calling, but you shouldn't have these guys smashing into each other and getting hurt, and it's a different, to be fair, it's also a different era. I spent 10 years, as I'm sure you guys know, I spent 10 years, with NFL Europe, right, running the NFL's developmental league. And I don't remember over the 10-year period ever talking about brain trauma, because that wasn't an issue in the 90s, But now it's a big issue, right? So you would never in today's world do what they did back in 2001, which was the scramble, which for those folks that don't remember, it's the replacement of the coin toss with two guys running at each other full speed and trying to recover the ball, right? So, things have changed, right? Sensibilities have changed. Science has changed. People are much more, I think, sensitive to the health and safety of all players, right? No matter what position. And, so it is a little bit of a different world nowadays.
Yeah, and you talked about the original XFL. So, it had the funding, it had the TV circulation, it definitely had the personalities. But, you mentioned the product on the field, keeping football. It kind of seemed like that's what it was lacking. And, me and Jay here are fans of the AAF. They're putting a pretty good product on the field, especially if they could go find a few more offensive linemen. What are you guys kind of experimenting with as you head into next year to kind of improve on some of those issues?
Well, there's a number of things that we're trying to do. So, ultimately we want to play really good football, right? If I had to pick one word, it would be crisp, right?
Sure.
A game where there are a limited number of errors, where guys are catching the ball. You don't have a bunch of penalties taking place, et cetera. So up tempo, fast-paced game, scoring, because people like to see scoring. I think the AAF you mentioned is playing some pretty good football. Their scoring occasionally will struggle. They'll be sort of in the high teens or low 20s, and that's not quite what I think the American public now expects from football. If you watch what the NFL did this past season, of course, over the many years of college football and the scoring, really getting high. I'm not sure we want a 65-60 game, but you like to kind of get into the 30s in terms of touchdowns. So there's a lot of work to do in that space. It's not easy, to sort of start teams from scratch, because you don't have that continuity that you have right with college, with spring ball, and they got new guys coming in, but they're also practicing, and they've got enough enough of the carryover of the upperclassmen to keep that sort of that gameplay in a good space where it's exciting and interesting and fun and compelling to watch. And obviously with the NFL, you've got the best players in the world, who are very capable of moving teams and playing at a very high level right off the bat. So it's not easy to do that. And one of the things I think you have to do is spend time, right? So Vince has given us the beauty of being able to hire, coaches back, last month in February, who are, putting their offenses together and their defenses and their special team, sort of strategies together. They're out there hiring assistant coaches. Those are all things that I think will help us, play a good quality game as we come out of the chute in February of 2020. Not easy, again, and we've got to get the right players, with the right coaches and all of that. And you mentioned offensive linemen. There's a couple of positions, offensive line being probably the most obvious. It's hard to find good players, right? The NFL is struggling in some cases to find good players. No, it really is. I think one of the reasons, for sort of the diversity of offensive styles in the college game is it's very hard for the colleges. Let's set aside Ohio State, which is a real juggernaut, but you get down into the the MAC level of schools, they have a hard time finding good offensive linemen.
Yeah.
So you're almost forced as an offensive coordinator to do a bunch of different things, to sort of overcome let's say the relative weak play that you might get from your tackles or guards or whatever. That's a tough position right now in the game of football.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, going back to the coachings real quick. So you've landed some huge names. Obviously Bob Stoops, coach GM of Dallas. You brought in Pep Hamilton, Jim Zorn, Mark Trestman. And all of these head coaches are, kind of getting that GM role as well. It's a really interesting concept. You're giving the head coaches the ability to kind of directly shape their roster. Can you kind of talk about the thought process of kind of doing it that way with the XFL, having them serve that dual role?
Sure. So, I have I had this vision of, the head coach / GM, Al Davis with the Raiders in the 70s or the early 80s, right? That was sort of this vision because, back then, and I'm old enough to remember those days, right? Played college and pro ball in the late 70s, early 80s. But I remember when, the coaching staffs of the team were effectively in the off season scouting, right? That's what they did. They didn't, sit in a room all off season to look at tape, but, they went out, they visited training, college camp, spring ball, watched film obviously as well, but, they were the scouts. So what we wanted to do was say to the head coach, listen, you're not only calling plays and, installing your offensive defenses, et cetera, but you're also going to be responsible for the personnel, much like it was in the 70s and early 80s in the National Football League. And what I was trying to do with that was to sort of avoid that finger pointing that happens occasionally in the NFL, which is,
Sure.
the coach pointing the finger at the general manager and saying, hey, I'm calling the right plays. You haven't given me the personnel to win. And the GM pointing the finger right back. You guys have seen it in Cleveland over there. Not now, where the Browns are on a roll. But
Thank goodness.
Seriously, you've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
And the GM says, oh, head coach, I'm giving you the right plays. You're not calling the right play. We wanted to avoid that, right? As a startup league, we don't need that. We can't afford to have that, and I think guys like, Bob Stoops, what have they done outside of coaching? Being a head coach in a major college program, you got to recruit, right? You have to identify talent. You have to say, this kid's 17 or 18 years old, and I think when he's 21, he's going to be a stud player, on the defensive lineman or whatever. And, so they have to kind of project. And I think guys like Bob, might have a little bit of an advantage because they've done that, right? Their entire career, every year, they've got to go out and recruit. And,
that's a great point.
Stoops and just think of the quarterbacks. He recruited, Jason White won a Heisman. He recruited Sam Bradford, won a Heisman. He recruited Baker Mayfield, won a Heisman. This guy knows talent. So I think that some of the guys like Bob and Pep who've had experience at the college level, they may actually have a little bit of an advantage because of the way we're sort of structuring it with the head coach being the GM as well.
So you talked with nearly 30 cities about hosting teams. What were the ultimate factors when you looked at all of these cities? Obviously Dallas, Houston, LA, New York, St. Louis, Seattle, Tampa Bay, and DC. What was that decision-making process? What were you guys looking for when you looked at cities?
Well, let's go back to the rationale for, the league, the XFL. And that rationale is that there are 85 million Americans who are football fans, right? Self-identified football fans. About half of that group identifies itself as a hardcore, passionate, diehard fan, right? Many of whom live in NFL markets, right? Because that's where you find a lot of passionate, diehard, hardcore football fans. So as we thought about our league and, the attraction that we would have, we realized that, a lot of those passionate diehard football fans, they want to watch more football. They have said, listen, when the NFL season ends, Super Bowl, early February, there's a void in their lives. They don't just transfer their football watching habits to, college hoops or to the NBA or, even to baseball, right, which, starts, early April. So, we believe that the majority of those fans live in the large NFL markets. In Dallas, these are fans of the Dallas Cowboys, season ticket holders. And they also, fans in Dallas who, follow the Aggies or the Longhorns or the Cowboys at Oklahoma State or the Sooners or, the Horned Frogs or the Ponies, SMU. Those are all people that care about the game. And we think, based on our research, that those are folks who will be willing to, purchase tickets, go to games, enjoy more football. They want to consume more football. They just, their interest in football doesn't stop, right after the Super Bowl, which is obviously the end of the end of the season. So, we chose some of the larger markets, right? You mentioned them, but LA, New York, Seattle,
yeah.
These are DC, these are all Houston, Dallas, these are all, top 10, top 12, top 15 markets. And we think that, Dallas Cowboys fans, right? They love the Cowboys, but those that really want to, they're willing to go out and watch, football. Now, it has to be good quality football.
Right.
So that's that's the task that we've kind of set for ourselves. But as I hired Stoops or Bob, Mark Trestman, Pep Hamilton, Jim Zorn, these are guys that know the game. I trust them. I think they can put together teams that play good football because that's what they're all about. We'll be rolling out our additional other four head coaches very soon, but these are all guys that I think are going to be in a position to really create good quality, crisp football that's fun to watch, that's compelling to watch. And I think at the end of the day, being in these larger markets, I think is going to be a plus for us.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic stuff. You talked about the high quality coaches, high quality football. You look at a guy maybe like Johnny Manziel. Is that someone that you guys would welcome into the league if he's healthy, if he's in a good spot? Is that something you're going to leave up to the GMs and coaches? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, these. We've mentioned like Stoops and his history with quarterbacks, so you got to assume that Bob knows quarterbacks.
Fair enough.
I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm going to rely certainly on the coaches' opinions of the variety of players, right, that are out there. I mean, ultimately, take the quarterback position. We don't see ourselves as a developmental league. Our job is not to develop young players for the National Football League. I ran the NFL's developmental league for a decade over in Europe, and I know what that entails. That's not the vision that Vince has. We want to build a sustainable standalone league, right? So we're going to rely on our coaches to identify what we consider the best 8 quarterbacks. Whether they're candidates for the National Football League down the road, who knows? That doesn't really matter. That won't, I think, enter into our sort of calculus. But what we want are the best 8 quarterbacks we can get, and get those guys obviously distributed, to our 8 franchises, regardless of whether they're future NFL players or not. So having run NFL Europe, and having worked over there for a number of years, I saw Kurt Warner come over, and Jake Delhomme, and Brad Johnson, and John Kitt. Now, these are all guys that, that benefited from literally just one season, 10 games over there. And they went on to, successful NFL careers. That experience of playing 10 games in Europe really sort of, catapulted them, if you will, or, catalyzed them into a solid NFL career. If that can happen, that's great. But, we'd also like to have, a guy play 2 or 3 or 4 years and not leave, to go to the NFL, because they may have been in the National Football League, but, that's not quite where they're best suited. So ultimately we want the best 8 players, and we're going to rely, in large part, on our coaches to give us that guidance.
So you mentioned, high caliber quarterbacks. Here at the Big Play Podcast, me and Jay are huge fans of your son, Andrew Luck, probably one of the nicest guys in the NFL. Growing up, did you ever catch him like in middle school using any curse words?
Well, he's like any other kid. He had his moments. Let's just say that.
but on a serious note, and then we'll get you out of here. Well, I mean, what's it like seeing him, on such a high level? Comeback player of the year. He had a fantastic year, healthy. When you look at the Colts last year, what's it like seeing your kid just killing it out there on the football field?
Well, my wife and I were particularly, happy, satisfied, or whatever the proper, term is this past year, because, he was out for a year. He didn't really know if he was going to be able to, throw the ball, with the strength and velocity and accuracy that you have to throw it, to be successful in the league. So, to see him, get back and play well, and the team play well, and kind of getting that run in the last, whatever it was, 2/3 of the season, get into the playoffs and win a playoff game and all that. That was pretty special, So obviously we were excited about that, and happy about that. But next year is another new challenge.
That's right. That's right.
There's no resting on anybody's laurels, right? In the National Football League, it's tough, it's competitive, and but we're my wife and I and 3 siblings, right, and that Andrew has, we're all happy he's healthy and able to do what he likes to do, which is play football.
That's fantastic. Oliver, we greatly appreciate the time. We're really looking forward to the XFL coming up here next year. We'll be covering it here at Big Play. Appreciate the time. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
All right. That was Mr. Oliver Luck.
Excellent. Great stuff.
Fantastic.
Very candid answers, too.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you, and thanks for Lou for setting that up.